Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to Behind the Book. I'm here with my co-host Karen, and we're excited to announce that we have Jami Albright here this morning to share some insights into her writing career and also her podcast, which we are big fans of, and we're anxious to learn from her. Karen, how are you?
Just fine. Thank you for asking. I actually was embarrassed to admit this. I had not listened to Jami's podcast prior to the interview, but since then, I've listened to several episodes and subscribed, and you're right, it's great.
They talk a lot about marketing tips and different sides of the business that I think are very helpful, especially for anyone who is just starting out with, a book or two. So, yeah, we were excited to have her. Anyway, what's been going on with you? Anything interesting?
Well, I promise this is going to be related to us, but I was talking to my sister the other day. This is the sister who's always honest. If you want the unvarnished truth, you would ask her. And she listens to our podcast. She's listened to every episode and she enjoys it, which is all good. And she said, but I have to laugh every time I hear your intro. Now, the intro is not us speaking. We had this really wonderful narrator. And I was like, why? And she said, because he describes the two of you and he says, no filters, like you're going to say these outrageous things. And she said, and then I keep listening and there's nothing outrageous. And I was thinking, so we have to really say something shocking now. But then I thought, we're two writers who are actually speaking publicly.
That is a scandal right there.
That's right. So that's as unfiltered as it gets. They let us out in the world and we're actually speaking. Not well in my case, but so there you have it.
Oh,
Family members don't have to listen if they don't want to. It's optional.
Right. Well, it's great that she listens in the first place. That's very sweet and supportive of her. And we'll try to come up with something shocking to keep her listening.
Well, she gave me some suggestions of authors to interview, which I jotted down. And
that's exciting.
So she's invested. She's along for the ride. So
all right,
that's glad to hear that.
All right, well, let's share our interview now. On with the show. Welcome to Behind the Book. We're here with Jami Albright today, which I'm so excited. I'm a huge fan and admire her so much. So I'm excited to chat with her. She is born and raised a Texas girl and is the multiple award-winning author of the Brides on the Run series, a fun, sexy, snarky, laugh out loud good time. If you don't snort with laughter, then she hasn't done her job. She's also a wife, mother, and actress/comedian. She used to think she could sing until someone paid her to stop. She took their money and kept on singing. Jami loves her family, all things Outlander, and puppies, which make her stupid happy. She can be found on Sundays during football season, yay, watching her beloved Houston Texans and trying not to let them break her heart. As a Seattle Seahawks fan, I feel your pain. Welcome, Jami. We're so excited you're here.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
And the one thing that your bio does not mention, but that we know, of course, because I'm a huge fan of the show, is that you are also a podcaster.
Yes.
So we'll get into that a little later. But tell us about how you became a novelist, what was your journey like, and what was your first published book?
Well, I actually did not start writing until I was around 47, and I started kind of dabbling. It was my reading buddy's birthday. Her birthday was in about 3 months, and I was trying to think of something kind of meaningful and significant that I could get her. And I've always made stories up, but I never wrote them down because my grammar has always been a little not great. But I thought, Jennifer doesn't care if I sprinkle my commas around like condiments, and so I came up with this idea and I started writing this story, and I had 3 months. I mean, come on, how hard could it be? I was so stupid. And but I quickly wrote myself in a corner but it wasn't all horrible. And I really enjoyed the process of just telling the story. So I didn't finish that, but I told her, I said, I was going to write you a book for your birthday. And she said, well, now you have to. So we loosely plotted my first book, which is Running from a Rock Star. So I wrote on it for a while, and then I went to Romance Authors of America once, because you could go I guess I went the 2 times. You could go a couple of times, but then you had to pay, and I was like, I don't know if I really want to pay. And so I ended up just not going back, and my computer crashed, and I lost the book. And I thought, well, I wasn't I'd written about 30,000 words, and I'm like, well, I wasn't really a writer anyway, and it was fun while it lasted, but I didn't really write anything else. And then on my 50th birthday, I was with my family, and I said, I think the only thing I really regret in 50 years is not finishing that book. And, they were like, well, you could. And I said, no, I've already, I'm not going to go back and start it again. And I don't know, a month or 2 later, my daughter came in and said, Mom, I found this flash drive in my car. Why it was in her car, I have no idea. But I think your book is on it. And it was about 20,000 of the 30,000 words that I had written on that book. So I dusted it off and, sort of was like, it's now or never. And I joined RWA again. At that point, I actually joined and talked about writing for about 3 or 4 months, because we do like to talk about writing as opposed to actually writing. And they had a critique group, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I got to do it all the way. And so I took it. Well, a friend of mine actually kind of helped me get it in a little bit better shape. And then I took it to this critique group, 10 pages. And I didn't know you were supposed to email it ahead of time. I just showed up at Panera Bread where they met, and I passed out my 10 pages, and they're reading it while I'm eating my potato soup, trying not to throw up, right there in front of everybody. And one lady actually kind of threw it on the table and said, I don't know if I can do anything with this. And I was like, oh, well, okay. But then a couple of other people were like, you know what? This is really funny. There's things she needs to know, but I want to know what happens next. And so I joined that critique group. They kicked my butt for at least 6 months. And I mean, it was everything. Like at one point, one of the ladies said, a sentence has a subject and a verb, because I would just write. And anyway, and one week they got me for run-on sentences. And so then the next week they got me for sentence fragments. And I did cry that week, but I waited till I got in the car, because I was just like, this is just too hard. 50 years old and I'm having to learn grammar again, which I still haven't learned very much, but they taught me to write more than grammar. They taught me to write. They taught me to show, not tell. They taught me how to build anticipation, and some things I knew because I'm a storyteller, and because of some of the things I've done in my past, I know how to build anticipation and get things going. But they really taught me to write. And 6 months after I joined that critique group, I won my first contest, my first RWA contest with that book. So that was kind of how it started, and I never really looked back. I stayed in that critique group, and then 3 of us kind of broke off from it and did our own thing, and with the intention of publishing. Like, we just were like, this is what we're going to do. And we were very intentional, and we all did publish that year. It was not that book. I co-wrote a book with one of my critique partners, and then the other one we all published that year. But that's how it got started. I just loved it. I just loved, even though I knew I didn't know anything and it was hard going, it was embarrassing, I still loved getting the feedback, going and fixing it, and then coming back and them saying, I can't believe you fixed this, and now let's work on this, and so it was great. I really can never thank them enough, because they really did believe in me and taught me to write, and believed me enough to be really, truthful with love, but with still truthful. So that's how it started.
What I love about that story is I have to backtrack and say I've been in a lot of writers groups,
Yes.
and most people do not take suggestions very well.
Right.
Most people will maybe tweak a sentence a little bit or something, and you think, "Oh, this person has so much potential." I mean, you can see it. Like they said, you were funny, but people don't want to do the work, or they're too married to their version of that story. And the fact that you were like, "Okay,
Yeah.
this is good, but let's make it better." That speaks volumes about you, that the perseverance and the
Well, thank you.
open-mindedness.
And the
you.
bravery for going
Yeah,
in
well,
there every week.
Yes.
It was hard, y'all. I'm not kidding. It was so hard.
We know.
I think it helped because I knew I didn't know what I was doing. But I knew the story was, because I'd read so much, I knew the story was funny enough and had potential. I just didn't know how to put it all together in the right way. Like the first 10 pages, they're in the same room, but they never interact. There's no meet cute. The meet cute happened like 2 chapters later, I guess, and they needed to meet in those first, or at least have some interaction. And so just things like that I didn't know. And then on top of it, the grammar stuff and spelling. Oh my gosh, the spelling is hard. I'm still a terrible speller. And I'm still not great at grammar, but because I spell like I talk and I have a horrible accent. It's I just talk and then I spell it like I'm talking, and sometimes I don't notice that little red line in Word, or whatever. And, yeah, it's not good.
You had mentioned that they thought your story was so funny, and that is a trademark for you, is the humor in your books. That's a really difficult thing to pull off, I know, because I've attempted it. Does it come easily to you?
In those first 2 books, yeah, especially the first book, because everything, I say this now because I never thought I would write really more than just the 1 book. Maybe 2, because I'd sort of set it up for 2. And I wish I hadn't used all my good jokes in the first 2 books, because now it's really hard. All that low-hanging fruit is gone. I gotta dig. I gotta climb higher. But so sometimes it is really easy. Like I just can get in. If I get an idea, like in my current book, there's a situation where she is pretending to be somebody else, and she just continues to say things to embarrass him. And so, like, when I got that idea, writing that was so easy. Like, I went back, when I was going back through to edit it, I didn't have to change much of anything. Just maybe clean it up a little bit so that it was snappier. But other things are not. Like, I'll write something and just go, that's not really as funny as I want it. Or sometimes I even say, insert something funny here in my first draft. But writing comedy is hard for many reasons. But the biggest one is because I don't want to write caricatures. Like sometimes all my books, because I write small town, all of them have, one person or, whatever, that person that's kind of the caricature, but they still have to have depth. They still have to be real people. And so that's why it's sometimes hard. And I might edit a funny part 6-7 times, just trying to get exactly the right timing. And it's like telling a joke is easier than writing a joke, because you can pause, you can have facial expressions, but when you're writing it's more difficult.
This is a good segue. You have also been an actress and a comedian.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. Like, what were your experiences, and how does that help and inform your current novelist experience?
Yeah. When I was in my 20s and in my 30s, I did some acting. I've been paid for both acting and doing comedy, so I guess I'm professional. But, the acting was nothing big. I did a lot of stage, like community theater stuff, but I have been, background in a couple of movies and stuff. So, but it was still fun, and I still took a lot of acting classes just because I really enjoyed it. And then the comedian happened later, like when I was in my 30s, and I did comedy for like women's groups. I never did it in like a club. I don't know if I was ever brave enough to do that, but because my audiences, when I did it, they were warm audiences. They came ready to laugh. They weren't trying to pick apart what I did. But I mean, I've done it for crowds as big as 3,500 people before. And so I don't think I would have ever had that opportunity like in a club somewhere because, that wasn't the journey. I was really doing it for people who were like me. And so it was a lot of mom humor. It was a lot of pee your pants humor, I mean.
The new genre
jump
of
rope,
humor.
the jump rope humor, as I call it. But that has helped me in the acting for sure with dialogue. Like I would say that's probably my strongest thing is that I can write it like I hear it. Usually, not always. Sometimes I have to go back and fix a lot of that. But for the most part, I write it like I hear it, and that has helped me. My books are really pretty fast paced, and I think that's part of just the acting experience has helped me with that. And then just storytelling with the comedy, I know how to build anticipation. I know how to lead into some things. Whether I execute it correctly or not is another thing, but I do know those things, and so that does help a lot.
The storytelling gene applies to all of it.
Yeah, and it's that's the thing that we all are storytellers. I mean, it's not anything unusual. It's just the people who choose to put it down on paper. That it's kind of a different animal when you put it down on paper, and so that's difficult sometimes for me. I have to really think about things, and I just have to know where I'm going. I guess that's the best way to say it. I can't just completely write into the dark.
I know, but performing is so brave because with writing, you can redo it. You're doing it in the privacy of your own home.
That's true.
So I think talking to 3,500 people and performing as a comedian, that's awesome.
One of my best friends, we used to live in Austin, and one of my best friends says, people would say, you're Jamie's friend, and they, oh, she's so funny. Do y'all just sit around and laugh all the time? And she said, well, I mean, yeah, we laugh some, but when it's just one-on-one, it's not the same as when she's in front of a big crowd. Jamie has the spiritual gift of large crowds because the bigger the crowd, the bigger I get. So
Oh, I love that.
that's what makes writing hard for me, though, because it is like this really solitary thing, and I don't have that immediate feedback, whether something's funny or how it's going to land. You don't really know that until you put the book out, and then by then it's a little too late. So that's a little tricky.
But you must be good at multitasking because I noticed on your website, it said that besides writing your novels, you also do work as a consultant for other indie authors.
I do, yeah.
So how did you get started doing that, and what kinds of services do you help them with?
Well, I got started with that because I was probably just a little too arrogant for my britches, but I had done well in the beginning. Like my first book just did really well out of the gate, and there were some things that I felt like I had done that other people could do. Like when here's my story. Everybody and their dogs heard this story, but I sold plasma to pay for my edits for my first book. Like I had no extra money for stuff like that. So when I put the book out, I certainly didn't have like advertising money or anything like that. But there were things that I did that really didn't cost me much money that I was able to do, and I wanted to share that with people. I wanted people to know that there were things you could do to get your book seen, and it doesn't always have to cost you a lot of money. So, and then I got my education through podcasts, my indie education. I learned everything I know about indie publishing through podcasts, and I held on to my first book for a year so I could learn the business because I didn't come from a business background. I'd never marketed anything really ever. And so I wanted to learn how to do those things. So I just wanted to share that with people. And, I do charge, but I try to keep it really reasonable so that people who are just starting out can afford it. And then I do things like evaluating Amazon pages and helping people with launch plans. I have a free launch plan on my website that anybody's welcome to. Just things like that.
Jamie and I met at NINC
Yep.
in want to say 2019 maybe.
It was. Yeah.
I think. Oh no, at Ram.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah,
But
anyway,
I remember sitting and talking in that little bar in at Neek. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just in complete awe and admiration, and actually, honestly, a little jealous because I've been doing this since 2011, and here comes Jami with this gorgeous book. And just is blowing it out of the park. And I realized, I have to tell you, that it was a profound moment for me after you and I talked, because I was like, I got to get my act together on this business stuff, because I can write a great book.
Yeah.
I've written 20 of them, or I don't know how many at that point, but I don't know how to sell them. And this woman figured this out, and I'm in such admiration about that. And I think that you consulting is a perfectly great thing for you to be doing, because you do know how to do it, and you've had so much success. And so I think that's great. I just wanted to mention that you had a huge effect on me. You've been such an inspiration to me, and I wanted you to know that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Well, and one thing that I kind of came into this business through the marketing side. Like all the podcasts I listened to were about how to sell books, how to get your books in front of people, how to market books. And so when I came into, I'd never heard of a blog tour. I'd never heard of teasers or cover reveals, all those romancy things that people do. I'd never heard of any of that, and didn't do any of that until my third book, I think. And still I don't use blog tours. I used one time, and it was just so hard to measure the success of that I just was like, I can put that money just towards something else that I know will work. And so yeah, I still don't do a lot of that stuff. I do a lot of my own kind of pre-release and release stuff. I don't have a PR company or anything.
You're a walking PR company yourself. All right, so kind of switching gears a little bit, you share on your website something intensely personal regarding a family tragedy. Would you mind telling us about that and why you decided to go public with the story?
Sure. So my book, Homecoming King, that came out last year, we might need to mention, I don't publish very fast. It's been a year since I've had a book, so I've got one coming out pretty soon. But yeah, so the book I put out last year, Homecoming King, it was it's about a football player, and originally I had wanted him to be a recovering addict from prescription pain medicine, because my cousin was a professional football player for 10 years in the NFL, and he was addicted to pain medicine and pain medication, and it's rampant in all sports, professional sports, but particularly in football, because those athletes don't get paid if they don't play. There are clauses in their contract that say you have to play so many games or so many downs to get a bonus or whatever. And so they play hurt, and the only way to play hurt is to be medicated afterwards or even during. So that was originally the thought was that. Well, it turns out addiction's not real funny. So I had to kind of change my thinking on that. I had talked to my cousin a lot about the character, and in writing it, I was just like, I can't do that. So he is hurt. He is trying to avoid these pain medications and stuff. So that's the whole gist of the book. But I do talk about it in the book, and how it is an epidemic, and how, it's tragic. Well, in the middle of writing that book, or I guess right before I started writing that book, my nephew died of a prescription drug overdose, and he was 32. And it was just so, it's just tragic. It's just so sad. And we kind of all knew there was an issue, but none of us really wanted to rock the boat, and we didn't want to make him mad. We didn't want to push him away. And we just kind of felt like we could love him, enough for that not to happen. And, it's so ironic, because my cousin, actually, he's clean now, and as he does interventions and works for a addiction clinic for athletes in particular, but he was a resource for us, and we didn't even reach out because of the stigma, and it was kind of secret. And we were, once you reach out and you take that step, then the ball is rolling, and there's no stopping it, really. And then you, as a family, have to make this really hard decision. And we didn't do it. And he died of an overdose, and it was just horrible, and it was horrible for our family. And I have 4 sisters, and this is my second sister's second child. And I just felt really compelled to write. I asked my sister if I could write about it, and she said, of course, if it helps even one person. And so I did, and then I put my cousin Randy Grimes, his information, his story a little bit, and then his information as far as, if you need resources, if you need to talk to somebody, that he's the person, and he can direct you, whatever. And I probably get 1 to 2 emails a month about that thing on my email. Either they've read it in the back of the book, because I put it in the back of Homecoming King, or from the website. So, yeah, it's really personal. I really worried a little bit about it, but if it can help even one person, or if it can make another mom or sister or aunt not feel so isolated or like we didn't do enough. The fact is, even if you do enough, sometimes it's not, it's not enough. It's really their choice, but we have regrets as a family that we didn't step in. And I just wanted people to know that they weren't alone if they feel the same way.
Well, I guarantee that if you hear from 1 or 2 people a month, there are dozens or hundreds that don't reach out to you that have been affected and helped by your being.
Opioid addiction is a national epidemic. It's just rampant in every city, in every town in the United States, and in professional sports in particular, because, it's easy to get. So that's kind of even this second book in that series. So I have the Bride series, and then Homecoming King is the first book of a second series. Right now it's called Small Town Royalty, but I might change it because it's a little misleading. But anyway, the second book comes out in just a few weeks, and he is a trainer, professional football players or athletes, not just football players, but high performance trainer. And he tries to do things so that people don't use medication like that, and so it's kind of a theme throughout the book, throughout the series a little bit. It hit really close to home, and I really didn't know if I'd ever get Homecoming King written because of just the grief. I thought, well, I didn't start writing it until about 3 months after he died, and I thought, oh, well, I'll be okay. And I started writing it, and about 2 months in, I was like, I am not okay. I am not okay. And so I took about 2 months off, didn't write anything, and then came back, wrote a little bit, and still had to go really slowly because the grief is just real. And I'm his aunt. I'm not his mother, or his father. And I can't even imagine that. Just want people to know they're not alone.
It's so important. I'm glad that you're open to sharing it. I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, we appreciate that a lot. Yeah.
Now, you said you didn't write for 2 months. When you do write, what does a writing day look like for you?
I usually can write it. Listen to me. Let me just tell you, I am no expert on this. I usually write in the mornings. If I'm going to write, if it's a day I'm writing, I write in the morning. I don't write every day. I can do several thousand words a day for a few days in a row, like 3 maybe, and then I have to take a day off. And my brain just does not, and my body, it's very tiring for me to write. I think because I know it's not perfect, and I want it to be, but I'm trying really hard to kind of back off that and just write the first draft. And I'm doing better, but it still exhausts me a little bit. And then I also have to think about things. Like I said, I can't just write into the dark. I don't plot really heavily, but I at least have to know where I'm going. And then I have a tendency when things get hard, I want to change it because it's too hard. But I really try. My critique partner one time called me out on that. And she said, sometimes you just have to write through it. like you're capable of doing it. You just need to write through it. So I try to do that. And then if I realize I really can't, that I've really written myself in a corner or something, I have to go back and figure out why. But I usually write during the day, in the mornings. I'm not real great in the afternoons. Life gets away from me, and if I don't start out writing, things will come up and I'll get distracted and stuff.
Yeah, and why is writing so tiring? I have that too. Like you almost get lethargic.
Yeah.
I have to like give myself a break and get
Go
myself
walk around,
moving a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be. We're just sitting here, right?
I know, exactly. It's just mentally straining for me. And but I do, when I am writing, I use the Pomodoro method. And so I'll do 20, 25 minutes, then I'll take a break, and then I'll do 20, 25 minutes. And, I can write about 1,200 words an hour. So it's not bad. I mean, it's not like I'm just picking my way through the whole thing. And I do better if I just write and don't think about the damn thing. Sorry. But if I don't think about it and just write, I do so much better. But then my brain, that internal editor just keeps coming in and keeps coming in. But yeah, that's how I do it. And then I use Pacemaker. Have y'all used that?
No. What's that?
It's a great tool. Like you can put in your work in progress or your book and how many words and when you want to start, when you want to finish. And like, do you want to work on the weekends, or do you want to do a steady daily word count, or do you want to start slow and then rise and then start, taper off? And it will calculate how many words you have to write a day to get done in that period of time. It's a free tool. I think you can have up to 3 projects, and then after that you have to pay for it. I've really enjoyed it.
What is the Pomodoro method? You mentioned that.
It's like a productivity tool. And so a lot of people use it, like they'll set a timer for 20 minutes or 25 minutes and pick up their house for that period of time, and then they stop. So for me, I use it as writing. I think a lot of writers do. I've heard a lot of people have used it, but it helps me. Like I can get overwhelmed if I know I have 80,000 words to write. It overwhelms me a little bit, but if I can break it up into these little 20-minute sprints, then it just seems more manageable. They're more bite-sized. And how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so that's how I write my books, just one little bite at a time, because it does, my personality is such and my strengths are such that big 80,000 word document, it takes too long. It takes too long, and it's hard for me to stay interested, because I'm number one activator. So I got an idea, let's get it done, let's do it. Well, you can't just do that with a book. You got to do it every day, or do it every 3 or 4 times a week, or whatever you do. And so if I break it down, then I can say, well, let's do this sprint. Okay, I can get that done, and then I can do another one, and so that works for me.
You mentioned that you feel really strong in your dialogue. What's the hardest part of fiction writing for you?
By far, what the heck do they do with their hands? Like, I never know what to do with their hands, and or their facial expressions. If there's one brow lift or shoulder, I don't shrug. I'll say she hitched her shoulder up, then down. I mean, I never, body movements. That is like my Sarah that I do the podcast with. We have actually talked about doing a book with all these descriptions of what you can do with your body and hands, because I would love to have a resource, because I can't ever think of it. So that's really hard for me. I usually don't even put it in, or I'll put in something like she shrugged or whatever. And then when I go back through to edit, that's usually what takes me the longest, figuring out what to do with their body. Like, are they moving? Are they sitting down? Like, how do you describe this? And, putting your head in your hand. And that's by far the hardest thing for me.
Well, and it's particularly nuanced when you write romance.
Yes.
Because that's the whole story.
Yeah.
It's these two people interacting on this intimate level.
It's the looks. It's the touches.
It's the looks.
Yeah.
All that subtlety, that and really how you're describing somebody falling in love in the course of 80,000 words.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what we're doing. Right. So yes, I also struggle with that. So you're not alone.
Yeah. And writing sex, I struggle. Like when I usually won't even write the sex scenes when I do my first draft. I just put sex and then I keep going because they do take me so much time. And then when I'm writing them, I'm like, wait, somebody has 3 hands or, in this thing or there's an extra body part somewhere. I've got to figure it out where I went wrong. So yeah, those take me longer. I'm getting a lot better at them. Like the ones I just turned in, I was like, wow, I didn't do half bad at these. So, and my editor, she knows that I really struggle with that. So she really spends time, extra time looking at those, telling me, okay, yeah, these are going to work, because I really want it to be as emotional that's appropriate. When the first time they have sex, it is emotional, but it's not as emotional as it is that last time they have sex before the big black moment. And then, and so I want their arc to be in the sex scenes as much as I want it to be in the whole story. And so she helps me just make sure that's happening. And I'm not just inserting, slot, B into slot A or whatever. I don't know how that phrase goes.
No, you talked about facial expressions, and Tess talked about the nuances of. I sometimes have trouble with what I call stage directions. Someone even walking across a room, and you're right. If you overthink it, you can make it into a way bigger deal than it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that hard, but I make it hard. And one of the great things is my critique partners, and Carla Rossi and Stacy Purcell. If you ever see their books, read them. They're great. But they were really, really good about saying, okay, this is like 5 pages and they haven't moved. Like, they haven't even blinked. Like, what is happening in this scene? And so that makes me, I hear their voices when I'm editing, because I'm like, oh, yeah, they haven't moved. They haven't done anything. They're just staring at each other. So it's good to have good teachers.
And then you mentioned your podcast partner. Is her name Sarah? Tell us about the podcast.
The podcast is Wish I'd Known Then for writers. So Sarah and I, the first conference I went to was called the Smarter Artist Summit. And I didn't even have a book out when I went. I returned all my Christmas presents and bought my ticket, my $500 ticket. I'd gotten a mileage check that I'd forgotten about, and I returned my Christmas presents to go to this thing because I just thought it was so important that I go and learn as much as I could before it was that whole learning process before I put the book out. Well, it was in Austin, and I had met a girl from here named Danielle, and we had coffee a couple of times, so we roomed together when we were there, and met this other girl named Sarah. Well, it turns out Sarah lives 10 minutes from me here in Houston, and Danielle lives 10 minutes from me. So we live in this little triangle, or lived. Sarah just moved to another little bit farther away. But so we started having lunch very regularly when we got home. And that was 5 years ago, and we've just continued. But almost immediately, Sarah and I both were like, I really want to do a podcast. And so we would talk about it, but, we were kind of like, we don't want to do what everybody else is doing. Is there really something different? And so in 2019, we just decided we were going to do it. And we talked to Becca Syme at NINC, actually, that year. And we had a name for it, like the Indie Author Podcast. And she went, no, you have to have a better name than that. And so we came up with the name, and but she really helped us and really encouraged us to go ahead and do it. She really liked the idea of talking to more experienced authors, successful authors, and just talking about what they wish they'd known when they started, or what they wish they'd known, before they did a big thing. And do you have things that you did that you thought were going to be like home runs and turned out not to be, and then vice versa? Did you make a mistake or something you thought, ooh, that's not going to work, and then it turned out to be okay? So those are the kinds of questions we ask, and we've been doing. I think we were 85 shows, I think is what we've done, something like that. So we've been doing it about a year and a half, and we love it. We really, really love it.
Such a good podcast. I love it.
you.
I'm a huge fan. Love that show.
Thank you. And she is a super successful mystery writer. So she wrote Cozy Mysteries, and now she has like mystery set in the 1920s. She has a series, and she's doing a spinoff. But we are total opposites in every way. She's very quiet. She's very reserved. She's super, super smart. And, but she doesn't like just spout, like she would never put something on her website that says consulting, because her ego is not nearly as big as mine. And so, but she really knows what she's doing. And what I love about Sarah, and I tell her this actually in this podcast that we just did, is that if she doesn't know how to do it, she will figure it out, and she'll screw it up and then figure it out and keep doing it until she gets it right. And so she's done a lot of things like narrate her own books. She just figured that out and did it. And so, her nonfiction books. So I'm really fortunate to have a podcast wife like her, because she does a lot of the admin stuff that I'm not real good at. So we've enjoyed it. It's been really fun.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. That's what I tell people when they ask me about doing a podcast. I say, well, make sure you got a podcast wife first. Make sure that's on the list. I'm better at, reaching out to people and asking them to be on the podcast or promoting the podcast and stuff. And so we balance each other out, but she probably does more work than me. So
you play to your strengths.
Yes, exactly.
Which is great.
Exactly.
So is there any writing advice that you would give to those just starting out?
Yeah, there is. One is just write the damn book. I mean, just write it. Start to finish, just write it. A lot of new authors, the first 20,000 words, they're gorgeous. They're gorgeous words. They're perfectly written. But then they've got nothing else because they keep going back. I did the same thing. I mean, you just keep going back and redoing that first 20,000 words. So just write the book.
Do you have a writing book that you would recommend to someone starting out?
I loved Writing Naked by Jennifer Probst. But I will tell you, when I started, I read Writing Romance for Dummies. No lie. And it was great. I mean, actually, it was actually very good as far as just the very basics of writing a romance. I love Jennifer's book. It really is great. And some of the best advice that she got and then shared, it has helped me the last few books, even though I still struggle with that internal editor. But she tells a story about when she was talking to Susan Elizabeth Phillips, who is honestly my hero and very successful romantic comedy writer. And Jennifer asked her, what do you wish you'd known when you started? And Susan said, I wish I had given myself permission to suck more. And meaning, just write it. You can always fix it, but you can't fix words that aren't there. And so usually when I write my first draft, I have a sticky note next to my computer that says you have permission to suck. And it has helped.
Who has been your biggest supporter as you built your craft and career?
Would have to be my husband. Yeah, I mean, with the second book, I was still working, and I worked at a hospital, so I would have to work weekends. But my book was due to the editor like on Monday, and but also like my house hadn't been cleaned, and we needed laundry, all that stuff too. So I was like, I only had to work half a day on Sunday, and I had it planned out. I would come home, stick a load of laundry in, do some bathroom, clean the bathroom, whatever, write for a little bit, then get the laundry. I had the whole plan. And when I got home, he had done the laundry, he cleaned the house. I mean, he had done everything. So all I had to do is sit down and write. And he does that. That wasn't unusual, but I had not asked him or anything, and he just done that for me because he knew I needed to get finished. And he does things like that all the time. I mean, if it weren't for him, he puts up with the fact that I'm in my head a lot of the time. And he's never said, we can't do that or you shouldn't do that. I don't know that he really thought that I could make a career of it because he didn't really know any authors or anything. I was the one that was like, hey, there are people making careers out of this thing. Like, I think I could do it. And he would just shake his head. Okay. But last year at Thanksgiving, we were around the table and said what we were thankful for several times because my daughter, we was at her house and she has little kids and she gave us all beans, and so we had to go around until the beans were gone. I was like, my gosh, I'm running out of things to be thankful for. But one of the things he was thankful for was Jami Albright, because that is my pen name. And he started crying because it's changed me, it's changed our lives, it's changed our kids' lives. It's just given us, and not that I'm not making millions. I'm not that writer. But it's changed the way I see things. It's changed the way my daughters see things. That really anything is possible if you're willing to work at it, and if you're willing to let some other things slide, because it does take a lot of effort, regardless of what you're doing. You can't do everything perfectly, but you can work hard enough to make something happen.
We always wrap up the podcast by asking some fun extra questions.
Okay.
Not writing related at all. So it's sort of our own little lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The first one. What is one food that will never get past your lips?
Sushi.
Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Jennifer Lawrence. Not for any reason, but that I really love her, and I really think she could do a very good job. She could make me look really good.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Probably invisibility.
At the end of your life, what do you hope you'll have accomplished?
That I love my family well.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
Ooh. The last job I had, which is ironic because it was a great job until it wasn't. And then it was just horrible. I had done it for 13 years, and I was a hearing screener for newborns, which I loved doing that. It was everything else that just turned really bad.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Grammar.
What's your favorite scent?
Gardenia.
What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
Gosh, probably go to that critique group that first night and hand out those 10 pages. Yeah.
When people pronounce words incorrectly, do you let them know?
No, because I do it too. I talk with a pretty bad accent, so sometimes I do it.
If you could live your life over again, would you want to?
No, I wouldn't do anything different, so no.
Well, this has been such a treat. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule as a novelist and podcaster and mom and grandmom. So
Yep.
I know you're a busy lady.
I am.
So we appreciate it. And
Thank you.
we will look forward to your upcoming book.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't wait. My editor sent me a message last night, and I hadn't heard from her, but that's not unusual. And she said, I was a little concerned because I hadn't heard from you since I sent you an email. I was like, you sent me an email? She said, I sent 3. And they had gone to my spam. I didn't know it. Her emails never go to my spam. And it was like, I'm 3/4 of the way through. I just want you to know this is a properly good book. And she said something else, but I can't say it because it's a little cuss word. But it was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, because I never know. I just turn it in and hope for the best. So
What's the title?
Duking It Out. So the first one in this series is Homecoming King, and then this one is Duking It Out. That's why it's called Small Town Royalty.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Sure.
And we will look forward to having you on whenever you have another book out.
Yeah, love to. Yeah, whenever that is. But yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comment section. This has been Behind the Book.